Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying the snacks thankfully provided for us by TFI. So again, I'm Stephanie Poon. With me is Noel Clemente. So on behalf of the School of Humanities, we are organizing, hopefully not the last, first but not the last talk on the ethics of generative AI. So to begin, let's just start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Breathe in me, Holy Spirit, that my thoughts may all be holy. Act in me, O Holy Spirit, that my work too may be holy. Draw my heart, Holy Spirit, that I love but what is holy. Strengthen me, Holy Spirit, to defend all that is holy. Guard me then, Holy Spirit, that I always may be holy. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. So we'll go right into the roundtable discussion. So we have 4 brilliant, amazing roundtable panel discussants with us. I'll introduce them all one by one, and then of course I will introduce our moderator. So first we have Lolek Pugeda. He teaches with the Theology Department of Ateneo de Manila University, and he specializes in moral theology, especially artificial intelligence, bioethics, and integral ecology. Ma'am Didith Rodrigo is the head of the Ateneo Laboratory for the Learning Science. Much of her research is on the development of computer-based learning materials and the use of AI and machine learning to understand the interaction between learning environments and student affect and behavior. Thank you. Smile Indias is a designer and educator exploring the intersections of design, disinformation, and social impact. As chair of the Fine Arts Department, she advocates for ethical, inclusive, and sustainable approaches to design, including the responsible integration of AI in creative and information environments. She is also very curious about human behavior around AI, where this technology is taking us, and what this means for the future of design and empathy in general. Oh, she's there. Okay. Okay, so last but not the least, Sir Raul Roncal also teaches with the Theology Department of Ateneo de Manila University and is also currently the director for the Office of Student Discipline. Okay. So as I mentioned, this will be moderated by Noel Clemente, who teaches with the Philosophy Department. Okay, so he's here. He will be here after I am done introducing everyone. So I give you now the floor.
All right, thanks, Steph. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know this is an exciting topic, especially with the fast-evolving language learning models like ChatGPT and other tools provided by generative AI. But this particular roundtable discussion is focused on ethical questions. And before I turn over the floor to our discussants to share their insights based on their respective expertise. Sorry. I'd like to begin with a very short explanation of why do we need to inquire about the ethical questions concerned with GenAI. So when we hear the word ethics, perhaps the first pair of concepts that come to mind are right and wrong. So we think of right actions, wrong actions. If you want to describe people, we think of good people, bad people, evil people. In other words, ethics is a matter of evaluating people and actions. So ethics is different from other branches of philosophy, which are like philosophy of the human person is more interested about what it means to be human. Philosophy of religion is interested in what sort of entity is it that we call God. So these fields are more descriptive. They try to make sense of what things are. But ethics is a prescriptive philosophical branch. It prescribes, it talks about kung ano yung dapat. So it's not just about what is, but what must be the case, what ought to be, what we ought to do. And as the world evolves and new kinds of technology are developed, inevitably ethical questions also emerge. As generative AI tools become more common and accessible, inevitably the question of what is right and what is wrong here, how ought we act vis-a-vis these tools? And I'm sure you've seen the recently circulated policy on Gen AI by the VP of Higher Education. This is not a discussion strictly tied only to the policy, because we should recognize that policy, like laws and guidelines, these are human attempts to make sense of what's right and what's wrong. And in an ideal world, policy equals ethics. So whatever is allowed by policy, yun yung tama. What is forbidden by policy, yun yung mali. But it's not always the case. There are some times that what is allowed is not always what's right, and what's forbidden is not always what's wrong. And this is by no means speaking against the policy. Of course, it's a good policy, and we should take it as a starting point. If something is allowed by the policy, there must be something good about it. There must be something right about it. And if something's forbidden by the policy, there must be something wrong about it. And it's our duty as moral agents to think, because we have the autonomy to think critically and make our own judgments. The easy thing to do would be to let policies and rules and guidelines to do the thinking for ourselves. Diba? Sundin na lang natin sila. But of course, from our experience as both teachers and students, there are gray areas, and it is our role, again, as moral agents, to have to make the judgment about these things. And this is especially important for Ateneo faculty, because we're not just teachers of subject content, we're also formators. And we play a special role in developing the personhood of our students. So one other question, beyond simply what's right and what's wrong about the use of generative AI, is also the question of what kind of learners and thinkers our students could become. So maybe just to kick off the roundtable discussion before we go to the more complicated, more morally complex questions of the gray areas, maybe we can just ask our discussants, what do you think can be considered generally right or generally wrong uses of AI? And more importantly, what's exactly right or wrong about these?
I'll just start, and maybe I will concentrate. I was asked to come here, I think, to elaborate on what's wrong, because my job is I'm now heading the discipline committee, and so I'm coming from the perspective of cases that we've handled. Of course, I won't mention the cases and the details, but at least I have it in my head. So one of the things that clearly we encounter by the way, my job is just to facilitate a group of teachers making a decision on a particular case. So that's the job of my office. And one of the things that clearly is in the heart of the teachers who are handling a case of a student who was brought to us because they use AI in a wrong way is the non-admission that they actually use AI. And then they present their work as something that of their own, and clearly they did not write it on their own. They use AI to write something, and they are claiming that it's purely their work. So I think what's wrong is the non-admittance of the use of AI, and clearly saying that this is my work purely. Nobody helped me. But then, of course, they get discovered that there is some evidence that they actually use AI. Even if the policy says you can actually admit that you use it. So that's one clear wrong that at least we've encountered.
I think parang by default po there, just the use of AI, there's already something generally wrong kasi grabe yung environmental costs of just using any tool. So if you just take that aside, to me, a generally okay use of AI is if it helps someone communicate their thought better because they're having a hard time. So kunyari po in the context of FA, if it's used as a tool to communicate an idea that they've not had the luck to find like a peg online, pero para lang ma-communicate nila yung what they have in mind, and the tool was able to help them communicate it as such. And it's not the final assessment, or it does not replace their ability to produce an image or an artwork or a plate, for example. That's generally okay as long as it's part of a process that helps them deepen the material that they'll produce. Yan. So, and obviously po, cited and clear, transparent articulation that AI was used in the ideation process.
I think for me, I can give one example of an acceptable use of GenAI, because our students have to create a thesis, and a lot of the times, the people who come to me create games, and these are CS majors. So many of them, some of them can draw, but many cannot, and so we tell them, we in the department generally don't grade the artistic contribution of the game because that's not really core to the expectation, but we do grade the mechanics and so on. Now, so a lot of times what they'll show us in their mock-ups are really just they use geometric figures as placeholders, a circle, a triangle, those are their characters already. And then if they have a little money available, then they'll actually go contract an artist to do their art for them. But not all students can afford it. So in cases like that, we tell them, just use GenAI because, we're not grading you on the art, but of course your game will be prettier if you have actual art assets. So in cases like that, we are actually it's the artistic side of the game is not actually core to what we're grading, so we would allow GenAI for that.
Okay, well, I was invited as a member of the theology department, so I hope you can bear with me if I theologize and take a bit more reflective approach on the issue of generative AI. Well, I think we should ask ourselves, what is the novelty of generative AI? Is it really something new? I think generative AI is really just a current iteration of a constantly evolving phenomenon, and that is simply the internet. The internet has been here since 1983, and it has jump-started since the 1990s. And how has that transformed our lives? We don't use physical papers anymore. Mostly, we use PDFs. We use Waze within Metro Manila. Sometimes we use Waze within the same city in Metro Manila. We use Zoom. The fact is, I think the fear of the ethics of generative AI is the fact that we isolate it from the broader scheme of the phenomenon that is the internet. I mean, we've survived Zoom. Why aren't we holding a ethics on Zoom? We've survived Waze, whereas I don't remember a blue board on the ethics of Waze. I think generative AI, for me, is complex, yes, but not something we can't surmount. And to answer the question of what is generally right and wrong, I would like to thank Pope Francis for this, because last January 14, Pope Francis released a document called Antiqua et Nova. When I found out that Pope Francis released that document, I said, thank God, 50% of my work is done. So the document is called Antiqua et Nova. So what is the difference between generative AI and other things like Waze and Zoom, which all use AI, by the way? He says in Article 3, it raises 2 points that I think we can answer what is generally right and what is generally wrong. He says generative AI, unlike other forms of technology, or other forms of AI for that matter, raises the growing crisis of truth in the public forum. Truth. So I think what is generally right and what's generally wrong is that which promotes truth and that which disincentivizes our understanding of the truth. Of course, what is truth? And at the same time, it also creates situations not foreseen by the programmers. So I think what is generally right are those things that are intended by the programmers, and what is generally wrong are those that are not intended by the programmers. So I think Pope Francis raises a very interesting point with regard to the question here. And I'll throw it back to the roundtable, but he ends paragraph number 3 with this statement. This new situation with regard to generative AI has prompted many people to reflect on what it means to be human and the role of humanity in the world. So I will end here for now, but I think in answering the question what's generally right and what's generally wrong is that which promotes what is human and that which does not promote what is human. Thank you.
Siguro since it's a roundtable discussion, I think at least what I gathered already from what's being said, I'm taking advantage of this because the insights that I will get you, I will use as we make judgments about the students in the future. But I think the key concern that we've encountered as teachers navigate a decision about whether a student did something wrong or not is clearly if they use it to help them think and develop something, that seems to be acceptable. And what clearly becomes quite wrong in our experience is when somebody is denying they use something to help to create something, and they say, "Akin to ha." And I think we all. I think you mentioned that there is and I think that's a struggle for us as we make decisions in terms of helping our students, because our concern in the discipline is not only to punish or we're also trying to help the students learn from the experience. And one of the things that we wanted them to learn is, hey, take advantage of learning. If you don't admit that you use something to help you, you did a shortcut on the learning process. And we're concerned about that. And so I think it's the admittance of the use of the tool in terms of the learning in the learning environment that we are encountering. And we're concerned if a student is clearly doing a shortcut and not going through the process of learning. It becomes a concern for us and a concern for the teachers as they evaluate the situation. So I think that's a key question for me is how do we spot that tendency of doing the shortcut of learning? AI is a tool, and I'm an engineer by profession, so I studied the patterns of what AI is. I did my own research to see it, and it's a wonderful tool to develop quick patterns and quick ability to bring things together. And so I say, it is a good tool to increase the capacity of students to learn some more. But how do we make sure that they use that well and not write a few things, create a paper on love, and then submit it and say, I did my research on love. So I think that's the struggle that at least we encounter in our work.
Yeah, I think one of the common threads with what has been shared is it's generally right if it's used truthfully or in service of the truth. It's generally wrong when, well, it's used dishonestly. You know, you're presenting your work as if it's original. But maybe I'd like to follow up on what Smile said, or but feel free to contribute for everyone. The environmental impact, because I think that's not so highlighted. So what do you think about the environmental impact of using generative AI? So can you add some details to that? And yeah,
In the spirit of transparency, I've not researched on this intensely. I just read that some tools take more energy to operate than some other tools. For I think DeepSeek yata yung mas recent na parang it uses less carbon emission and things like that. Pero may iba pa siyang controversies around who's actually funding these tools. So yun lang siya, parang to us it's a matter of clicking things, and we're using electricity that we pay for, but for the system to operate it actually requires power that's just invisible. So to us it's an imaginary cost, but it actually costs more for the environment for us to keep using these tools. So it's one of the things I also think about when, for example, I ask ChatGPT to reply to some of the emails you send me. And so sometimes that's one of the things I think about. Is this worth the environmental cost that it takes? But nag-iisipan ko rin siya eh. Gagastos din naman ako ng Meralco, di ba? Parang like, matagal din kung ako rin yung susulat nito. So yun yung value judgment, I think, of just using the tool in general, because these are some parang yun nga, invisible costs siya eh, that we don't necessarily factor into the conversation.
Maybe just to add to that point, please verify me if this point is in fact true, but I recently learned somewhere that the carbon footprint of using generative AI tools is actually more than, I think, using a simple Google search. So if you use a Google search, of course, that causes a carbon footprint. Of course, nothing is free, I mean, just because you don't see the internet does not mean it's not there, and it does use machines that are somewhere around the world. And when you use generative AI, I think that uses more carbon than a simple Google search. So I think that raises the question, if generative AI becomes the new Google, what will that mean in the long term in terms of the carbon footprint of humanity?
PG.
Sorry, I don't have a mic. Hello. What I recently learned from an MIT report was that there's also a lot of water used to cool the systems that run generative AI, because it generates a lot of heat, like the processors. They literally generate heat, and obviously, if the system overheats, and all of the hardware will get destroyed. So they use a lot of water to cool down the processors. And again, this is another environmental impact that I think is worth thinking about.
Yeah, thank you for that. Maybe it's good to transition to this question, no? Kasi sometimes we approach generative AI in the third person. So maybe if you could share, have you personally encountered some moral questions in your use of generative AI, which might help uh, inspire the reflection of our audience? So I think Smile shared something earlier.
I think in my case, I'm always a little cautious when I use it, especially because when I have to write, sometimes you have to write in a rush, and if you need to be able to sort of organize your thoughts quickly, or for that matter, look for sources quickly, my go-to is Google Scholar. You know, I collect the source materials myself. I read them myself. I've recently tried using ChatGPT to say, I need sources, I need literature on this topic. And so it gives me a list of sources, which I actually then go and read. So I've not gotten to the point where I tell it to summarize for me, because actually with O3, ChatGPT O3, you can do that. It'll write the whole thing for you. So I've not crossed that line, but I also worry sometimes because you talk about gray areas. Parang is that act of asking ChatGPT to sort of shortlist sources for me already in a way of cheating? Am I not being and am I not putting in the work? So yeah, I struggle with it sometimes, but the consolation I give myself is, well, I don't just take the sources at face value. I do read them. A lot of them I throw out. So, ano pa rin, there's a process on my side. It's not I'm not wholly dependent, and I can truthfully say that when I write, it is me talking. It's not ChatGPT. So, what I have done is I've put my text through ChatGPT and I've asked it to do a grammar check, but I've not asked it to write for me.
Siguro po mas specific to FA, no? Any of the Gen AI tools that can be used to generate images or artwork, based their output through stolen images. So I think parang Adobe Firefly pa lang yata yung alam namin so far that will really pay for the copyright of the images that they'll use to generate another image. So even if, for example, we allow the use of AI in our information design classes, we might actually be making our skills obsolete by promoting the tool. But on the other hand, we cannot not teach our students how to use the tool because they might get left behind. So parang to us, a moral line that we should always be thinking of is how do we train our students to think and not just rely on the tool without also making us obsolete in the process. Kasi kunyari ngayon yung Adobe software, sobrang nagmahal siya ng cost, but it also allows the integration of AI into just the software. So dati it will take a graphic designer possibly an hour to edit an image. Now I can literally just click a house and tell the AI to make it a lighthouse instead of a bahay kubo. Now I'm not sure how much we should teach our students, how much of the editing should we teach and how much we should rely on the software. But it also promotes just the use of a singular proprietary software. So Adobe lang yung so far nagbabayad ng copyright for the images that it uses. And so it's a lot of these things, I think, for FA, at least for ID, graphic design, no, dun siya mas scary kasi now, even in Illustrator, which we use a lot for our design work, for us to be able to assess how much AI is used in a project, we ask for the raw files. But now, AI can also generate raw files in Illustrator. So by teaching them the tools, we are also basically telling them someone else can do this job at a much faster rate than we could ever do. So I think yun, forever siyang moral question, di ba? Parang how do we make sure our students are not left behind while also...
And I think to follow that, no, because I'm not only a discipline head, I'm also a teacher. So I'm seeing the tendency as we handle these cases, two extreme approaches. Let's just have people write their essay handwritten and prevent them from using AI. No? And so that we can help them process and be critical thinkers. So that's one. And I ended up just doing that for my class. Too many cases of AI. Let me just have my students write essays. But then there's a part of me as a teacher that says, but AI is a tool that could increase the capacity for creative thinking in the same way, because I'm an engineer and this will reveal my age. When I was in the transition of my professors allowing me to use scientific calculators and taking exams, right? And so, but what our professors did, my engineering professors did, is let's allow them to use scientific calculators, but let's make the engineering problems more difficult. And that I remember that transition. And my gosh, I said, let's forget the scientific calculators. These problems are difficult. But it pushed my creativity, it pushed my mind. So in this sense, I'm also experiencing some kind of transition. I say, wow, is there a way for me to use AI to, instead of just having my students write a 2-page paper, guys, use AI and give me a book after a week on this topic? I mean, again, I'm just exaggerating here, but that's the dilemma that I'm seeing as a teacher and somebody who's trying to help teachers decide that's bad, that's okay. That's the dilemma. Again, I'm just coming from a learning, forming our students. How do we use this tool question? Again, those the environment questions are also very important, but maybe I'm just more faced with this issue with my students. And so the moral question for me is, how can I help my students use AI to push their creativity, to push their learning, to learn more and to gain more, like me, in the use of my scientific calculator? So that's a question. I've not answered it myself, but that's the question that I am experiencing now.
Sorry. Can I just add a riff of what you both said? Because we confront the same problems in discs, because one of the probably most prominent use cases of GenAI is really in programming. So there was this news story that came out early, like about 5 months ago, that Amazon slashed $260 million in programmer costs because they were able to sort of supercharge their programmers with these co-pilots that can help them code. And so the jobs in programming are really threatened by co-pilots, GenAI. So for us, same as you, Smile, what do we teach our students? Do we still teach them how to code? Because that's the fundamental skill of computer science, but you have to know how to code. At the same time, they have to learn how to use the tools, because when they go out into the job market, that's what the employers are going to look for. So right now, I have a postdoctoral student who's actually, postdoctoral fellow, who is actually doing a little study about that. But he's trying to figure out what sorts of skills industry is looking for with respect to knowing how to use these tools, and then what teachers are teaching, what methods they're using to teach. And then he's trying to sort of identify that gap, because we like, if we were to teach the tool with the tools, what now will be the skills that will be lost in the process? So he's trying to sort of piece that out, but we don't have results yet. I will let you know when we do.
Well, for me, my gripe with Gen AI, if you could call it that, is that it lacks conviction. I ask an opinion from Gen AI, it gives me an opinion. I say, I disagree. I think this is the case. You know what the response is? You're right. I apologize. Okay, it reinforces my opinion. I play devil's advocate. I switch my opinion and I say, but what about this point? What will the Gen AI say again? You're right. I apologize. And it goes on and on and on. And for me, as coming from moral theology, you know, moral theology is a complex field, but I think at the end of the day, it affirms that there are certain fundamental truths about human existence, about what it means to be this or that. And if Gen AI can't even pick a stand, okay, I think that would be a very big moral problem if it just reinforces your pre-existing perspectives rather than when was the last time you used Gen AI and it said, I'm sorry, I beg to differ. When was the last time Gen AI said that? I'm sorry, I beg to differ. Actually, this is what I think. It doesn't. It just provides information and whatever you want, it gets. Because at the end of the day, Gen AI, as Sir said, is a tool. But I would like to reframe it as a product. It's a product that's meant to satisfy. And if the product does not satisfy, well, you turn to a different product. So I think the problem with Gen AI is that they are competing among themselves as to which can best reinforce your opinion the most. And if you have a wrong premise to begin with, well, then that leads to a domino effect where you're just reinforcing your error upon error. And I like to study bioethics. Suppose you ask Gen AI for medical advice, and you say, I don't think that's the case because according to what I feel, this is the case. Oh, you're right. That is in fact what you have. Is that the future we want, where we just reinforce our opinions, or should we feel challenged? And I think coming from a university setting, that is what we should promote, to be disagreed upon. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, but it does mean that you're forced to refine your arguments. So I think that is my problem. Thank you.
And I think that's the key that you just described a while ago. It must be a tool. And we are the ones who would use it with our creativity in our mind to do more. And it's when, it's very clear in our cases, when somebody does not admit that a tool made the project, so this person did it because he did not use it as a tool. No, he allowed that tool to be the thing that thought made something for him. But what we want to do is, how do I help this student recognize that the conviction will come from you, but this tool, using your analogy, using the different things that you use, is a tool to increase my conviction on the truth. But I have to be the one to prompt. I have to be the one to prompt. I just did a quick exercise before I came here just this morning. I said, let me ask AI to explain itself. So I did my research. What is AI? And then it gave basic descriptions. And then I said, wow, this is nice. So can you give me a sample of the code that you use for feedback systems? It gave me a code. And then in the code, I said, can you explain this code to me? And explain it a bit. And in that process, I used AI to teach me about itself. But I made a decision. And it increased my knowledge. And I said to myself as I was doing that, how can I do the same for my students? In such a way that they can use this thing that never existed in my time to increase. I mean, imagine in 10, 15 minutes, I was able to dive deeply into, at least in a layman's way, on something. And guided by a PhD person, most likely I would learn some more, you know? And I might have a faster capacity to gather information. So I think the key is, how do we use this as a tool to help us human beings pursue the good and do whatever is beneficial to people? And that's what we're trying to train our students to do. It's when it is not a tool, and it's the one that's dictating to them, and they don't even use it as a tool, and they don't use their mind. That's, I think, the reason why it becomes problematic. So they're just using the different descriptions that you used a while ago.
Thank you, sir. And maybe, just say, yes.
Just on that thread, because like Gen AI is indeed quite patronizing. Like it does say you're right, but it depends on the field also. So what you just indicated, I'm in a field where it's very theoretical and it's easy to say what's right and what's wrong. When it's in that field, Gen AI will have more conviction and more assertive. I think a lot of it has to do with understanding what's going on and what it was trained on. The reason why it has that doesn't appear to have as much conviction is there are topics which are contentious, and since it was trained with text out there in the web where where it's possibly, for example, multi-sided, then it would know the different sides, and as a result, it could tend to go one direction if you pry that way. On the other hand, for more precise fields, the more you pry, the better it gives answers. Like it gives better answers the more you pry for more precise fields, and I think a lot has to do with also, and that's what I'd like to drive. It's understanding what the tools are at that level, not technically the way we computer scientists understand it, but we need to get to a point where we don't treat them as black boxes and understand what's going on behind the scenes at a level that's not even at the level of an expert, but at least understanding that it's trained from text out there, curated, but the reason why it sometimes makes a mistake is because there are mistakes out there. And the reason why it would give you different sides of a story is because it's exposed to that. And the more stuff that's out there, the more it will tell you that.
And John Paul, just to also maybe add to that, and I realized that as I was trying to understand this from my work, I could not escape. I need to also learn about AI and not avoid na lang to, don't learn. But I had to dive into it, get into Gemini, get into Copilot and understand, so how does this thing work? And I realized that that's an important thing that we need to also learn to understand AI itself so that we can use it properly as a tool.
Yeah, maybe just to pick up from Sir Raul's point, maybe to end more positively, because we'll open the floor for questions from the audience in a little bit. But so we've started with some kind of puzzles, like what do I do when I'm in this position? But maybe more positively, how do you think can Gen AI help us become better teachers or better students? Because ultimately that's our goal, right? And I mean, do you think of particular ways by which we can do that?
Yes, maybe just to begin the salvo there. Well, just to end on my last point, that's why after a tiring day at Ateneo, I sometimes use GenAI because that's one of the only times I'm told that I'm right. So, now I have a copy of the guidelines here, and it's many pages. But I think I would like to focus with regard to the question on page 6, and it's under ethical use, and I think the raison d'etre of the whole guidelines can be summarized in point number 1. Ensure that in using Gen AI technologies, the promotion of human dignity and the common good are upheld. So I'd like to focus on that. What is human dignity and why is the promotion so important in the context of Gen AI, especially in the context of education? Well, I'm coming from a theological perspective, so you're free to disagree with me. I think our human dignity comes from the fact that we are made in the image and likeness of God. Imago Dei. Now, why would that be relevant for Gen AI and especially for education? Well, let's think about it. Imago Dei, we're created in the image and likeness of God. What kind of God do at least Catholics believe in? A God that became human, that suffered, died, was crucified, resurrected, went through all that to demonstrate love, effort, and whatnot. Why didn't God just snap his finger and say, you're all saved? Why did God go through all that effort just to do that? And I think it's because love, being human, takes effort. And I think in the context of education, the point there is that human dignity flourishes when we do the work, when we personally engage with the material. Just as God came down to be with humans, I think generative AI should challenge us to engage with the material rather than just take the easy way out. In other words, I think human dignity is born out of a meaningful encounter with the lessons we learn here, the topics we encounter, and through that, we promote human dignity. The question is, how do you think Gen AI can help us become better teachers or better students? I'd like to quote again the document by Pope Francis, Antiqua et Nova. It says, the words of the Second Vatican Council remain fully relevant today. True education strives to form individuals with a view toward their final end and the good of the society to which they belong. That paragraph ends with this sentence. Education is, quote, never a mere process of passing on facts and intellectual skills. Rather, its aim is to contribute to the person's holistic formation in its various aspects, intellectual, cultural, spiritual. And I think in becoming better teachers, better students, I think we should be reminded that there are some things in this good world that should take time, that should take effort, that not everything should be, quote unquote, convenient. Because I think there is meaning in the hard work, there's meaning in the effort. And I don't know how our good students, how our professionals are after or beyond Ateneo, but I think one of the aspects of Ateneo is that it reminds us that some things take time and effort, and hopefully that carries on beyond the university. Okay? I mean, maybe I should just, the tax information in front of me is too complicated. Maybe I should take the convenient way out. Maybe I should do this or do that because it's convenient. But I think human dignity is in embracing the difficulties that life has to offer and finding satisfaction in it. And I think that is an aspect of education that we should embrace, that there is meaning in hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. May I give a couple of examples to respond to at least the better teacher part? There was a project that I was given the privilege of working on last year for EdCom 2, and the theme of the project was the use of AI to support public school teachers. I think everybody in this room is familiar with the plight of our public school teachers. They're overloaded, lots of admin work, lots of students, overcrowded classrooms, not enough school resources, etc. And then they're often asked to teach subjects that they actually did not specialize in. So my favorite example is I was interviewing a teacher who was really a math major, and she was being asked to teach relaxation massage. So actually, that's when I listened to her, I said, Ma'am, ano po yan? Pakiulit. Because I wasn't sure I heard her properly, but she said, yes, relaxation massage. Okay, so I think that this is, again, a use case where Gen AI might be very convenient and helpful. That if the teacher must produce a lesson plan very quickly, Gen AI can step in and help them with that. What I like about empowering the teachers and not directly the students is because I feel that you get that multiplier effect. Because in many classrooms in the country, your only source of education is the teacher. You don't have books, you don't have textbooks, you don't have internet. In some cases, you don't have electricity, you don't have water, you might not have, you don't have any of these supplies. So yung natatanging educational resources is just the teacher. And so if you provide him or her with the resources to prepare better assessments, better lessons, more engaging activities, maybe we have more of a chance. Maybe our children have more of a chance. Now, what about us in our environment? I have an ongoing project with the Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health, and I'm really like, this is a tremendous source of delight. I can't even begin to tell you how tickled I am, because what we're doing is we're helping the teachers create a simulated patient whom the medical students can use to practice medical history taking. And so we have several versions. We have a text-only version. We have We have an audio version that you can talk to and that will talk back, and then we have a VR version, which is still in the works. What I have on my computer is the text version. If anybody wants to see it, let me know. As I said, I'm so tickled. I'm happy to demo it. And the reason why we are that we took this project on is first because there is an ethical dimension. Students, because for students to practice taking medical histories, you need to expose them to simulated patients or what they call standard patients. So they literally train an actor. If you're in the first world, there are schools, there are the agencies with actual actors who specialize in playing the role of standardized patients. But here in the Philippines, walang ganon. Okay? So they pull people off the street, and ask these people to play the role of the standard patient. And actually, Dean Dodi of ASMPH questions the ethics of doing that. Parang, is it ethical for us to just, yank people and say, here, we'll pay you, whatever money they pay you, and here, study this case, and our students will ask you questions. So he was actually thinking of it from that ethical standpoint. Baka naman it's not an ethical thing to do, to subject human beings to play this role. And so if we do it to the computer, it's better. The other reason why we're doing it is because a lot of the systems that are available are developed, of course, in the West, right? So they don't understand things like pasma and hilot and lamig and all those Filipino terms that are related to health. So we're hoping to build a database that actually has those terms. It's interesting, actually, if you question my so it's the doctors who build the database. We put it on top of ChatGPT, and so ChatGPT is restricted to answering questions based on what's in that database. And it's funny because if you, so one of the patients actually went to a hilot because the patient's knees were painful. And just to show you that ChatGPT doesn't understand what a hilot is, it counts hilot as a psychiatric consultation. And so I was like, bakit psychiatric? Hindi naman siya psychiatric. Anyway, so those are things that we have to fine tune. And so we're hoping, okay, what is the grand scheme of this? We're hoping that when the system is stable, that it's something that we can share with other medical schools. Because it is difficult and expensive to get a standardized patient. You have to pay them, obviously. So we're hoping that with this tool, that students will get more practice. And so that's an added, and because that's why we're making it also in 3 versions. You can, if you don't have the VR headset or if your internet is slow, kasi ang bagal talaga nung audio, the text is actually faster and you can still get that practice, although maybe not in the duration. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Specific po sa FA, I think 2 examples. One of the things I really enjoy using AI for in class is so I teach design research, so mas sociological research so teaching our students how to also talk to other people outside of our Ateneo bubble. And so what I like doing is asking ChatGPT or any text-to-image generator to generate an image of empathy, for example, or ask an AI tool to make me a lesson plan on empathy. And then I'll deliver that lecture and tell them, this is actually what AI tells me what empathy is, but empathy is something that only we can perform, but it's something that it knows. In my other class, I'm teaching a leadership and youth engagement class this sem. I asked ChatGPT to generate an image of Filipino leadership, and it generated Malay man on top of sobrang weird, parang Banawe Rice Terraces pero may mosque sa taas, mayroong 6 flags of the Philippines all over, may parang barangay na may mga kubo. And so I used it as a prompt in class to just jumpstart their reflection also on why a tool like ChatGPT would generate an image as such. So bakit kailangang lalaki yung leader figure dun sa gitna, bakit may mosque sa taas ng Banawe Rice Terraces. Why do we look like this? Diba? Parang when you talked about AI has no conviction, it actually has. Diba? It has the conviction of the language that it learned. And so that's how Asians are typically depicted in AI tools, diba? Parang we look very smooth, polished, prim and proper. Parang wala siyang, yan. So I like using AI in classes to just tickle this word, the brains of our students into thinking and reflecting on what our current biases are. And second, I like it when our students use AI tools to enhance their practice. So they should know why they're using the tool. So it's not just to take a shortcut or because they don't want to spend X amount of time problematizing storyboards, for example. They just want to get to the finished product immediately. But if they do use the tools and they know the impact of the tools on the output that they'll produce, then to me that is a good use of the tool, because at least it deepens their thinking process as to their final output in a design class, for example. Malinaw kung bakit. Okay, so imbes na nag-Photoshop siya or nag-Illustrator siya, nag-text-to-image generator siya for this particular exercise because it has an intrinsic value to the artwork. So it's not a workaround, it's actually just part of the arsenal, di ba? Part of the tools that they can use to generate or to create a more valuable product. So yan.
I think I already shared some of my convictions about just using AI as a tool, as a teacher, and also I think as a student, for our students to encounter or experience deeper learning. And how do we do that is still, I don't know, but that's at least an aim in my head to use it as a tool for me as a teacher to learn more and also to help my students learn more.
Yeah, maybe we can open the floor for any questions from the audience.
Questions or even comments? So you can just raise your hand and I'll come to you with a microphone.
So thank you. I have a question regarding, it was mentioned kanina yung ownership, no? And sir, I found myself in the same situation as yun. Nainisip ko, magpa-essay na lang kaya ako na para madali. But then I also thought na, are we ending up punishing students for essentially not going to the library? No? For example, I teach biology. What if I gave them a problem about cell division? And they ask, how do cells divide? And then probably AI will say, oh, mitosis. And then in reading mitosis, they will notice, oh, part 1 is DNA synthesis. How does DNA divide? And then have another question. Then in the DNA synthesis, there's like a mutation thing. And then, why do cells mutate? And then after one afternoon with AI, they actually have 3 chapters of a textbook. So by saying they don't own it, are we just punishing them because hindi nila ginagawa yung ginawa namin noong 90s pag gumagawa kami ng literature review na pupunta kami sa library, we'll spend 2 days there doing exactly what they're doing, but in a shorter amount of time. And maybe ang kulang natin is the tools to check how they ask questions, which would be what they own. So they own what they ask, but the answers, you know, that comes from a computer which has summarized what was 20 years ago in the library. So how would you say, lalo na, I don't want your job, no? I mean, how do you, pag may na-accuse na, oh, you're plagiarizing AI, no? How do you distinguish?
Yeah, and I think that's I think the advantage, well, and disadvantage of my job is I'm also a teacher at the same time. I'm part of the discipline committee. That's why, if I were just not, I mean, if I'm a teacher, I won't be asking that question of so that, you know, we shouldn't just stop people from using AI. The policies are very clear. Admit if put some kind of notation that you use AI, and I think that's adequate. But then it's very tempting for our students to do the shortcut. And it's faster to do the shortcut now. And it's hard to spot. If sometimes when a student, two students put in the same notes and the same narrative of an experience, and they're asked to actually give a report on their experience using an article. When they feed it, same notes, same article, same experience, what comes out is very similar. And so then you make a judgment, nagkopyahan ba? And then they both say, no, we just inputted the data. And but then, as I said, I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question, but maybe the question is, can we develop ways of doing things and assignments and assessments that already, it's in place already that they will use it, but we will judge their use, and maybe the product must be more than what than what is demanded of them. Because it is a 4-page paper. So AI, bilis lang, but so that maybe that's a question. I'm not answering it, but it's like a thought process reflection as I'm dealing with these cases myself.
Sorry, did you have your hand raised a while ago? Yeah, sorry. And then.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Leo Aquino. I'm actually Doc Noel's student in his later class. I'm taking MA. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on what I noticed the discussions earlier were about. And I think we opened up by talking about like what is generally good or generally bad about AI. And I remember one of the things said was that one of the generally good things would be if it were to promote the truth, diba? If it were to further us into the truth. And what I realized is that Gen AI in its use is to a large extent uncurated. Like while I was reflecting on its difference to something like a website like Wikipedia or even news articles, diba? Like there is a huge pressure on those websites for curation, and yet when we use generative AI, it's more using a database, but that database isn't necessarily filled with truths, diba? It's usually about what people write, type down, and like what the AI takes from the internet. So once again, seeing this difference, I do believe that it does there is an integration of Gen AI in something like teaching, in that I think it does teach us to be more critical if we have the disclaimer of what may be written may not be true, what it tells you to be true may not be the case. Yeah, I think it does teach us to be more critical, to be more to be better at like trying to discuss what might be better sources, to ask it the questions of sources rather than treating it as an ends. We have to use it as a means. And yeah, what we ought to learn is to coexist with it and to learn to better reach the truth both with it and despite it. So yeah, that's my comment.
Good evening. I like the point of Sir Raul very much on parang not making it the end. I think this was also the theme of the comment kanina. Not making it the end point. Parang ako, my fear is like there will be a massification of AI in the sense that civilians are using it left and right. Civilians, I mean citizens, are using it left and right, parang to draw me a picture, a brown BTS or whatever. I mean that's so very racist, but something like that. Parang that is not a good use of AI. What I'm trying to say is, kanina I was listening to the point on how AI is like stupid, just agrees with you. And I think the version of AI that we have now is like the stupidest version of it that it'll ever be. Because like there's talk now of agentic AI, which is like really a leap if you get to use it. And then I was reading the the interview with the DeepSeek person, the DeepSeek CEO, and he was saying, no, I mean, ayaw namin makipag-contest dyan sa lahat. Ang gusto namin, AGI. And AGI is already like, it's going to give us a human-like kind of AI. Like, it's going to be like your very efficient coworker. Ganun na siya. It's not like just an Excel sheet AI that we have now. So having said that, my point is, ako as a teacher, what I'm trying, this has to do with my concept project. I consulted yung Ma'am Didit about this. What I wanted to do is to teach students on how they can ideate of AI as a tool for their industry. My industry is journalism and communication. So what I wanted to do is for AI, or for us, for students, for teachers, to think of how we can use AI to overhaul or to do things with our industry. Mali yung gawin nating gumawa tayo ng mga AI na magbabasa ng news. Bakit hindi natin i-overhaul yung news gathering processes natin para yung mga grant work natin, ipagawa na natin lahat sa AI? Ako, sa tingin ko, yun yung challenge. We should teach people how to think at an industry enterprise level para magamit yung AI for this.
Thanks, Arlene. Can I just respond to that? This, I agree. I agree with you. I think this is where the ethics, maybe going back to the first question, can also come in, because the problem that we have here is that there's going to be such a split between those who know how to use AI and have access to AI and those who do not. So the divides that we see now are going to be even worse, because people in this room will be fine, but the people who, I keep going back to public schools, are the typical public school grad after grade 7 has a grade 4 education, or high school, I think, has a grade 4 education equivalent. How they're going to lose out a lot. And so the question becomes like, how do we use AI in an equitable way so that we don't, those of us who have it, don't go careening off and leaving everybody behind, but actually, use it as the tide that lifts all boats, diba?
And maybe that's also worth discussing, because nowadays, the divide in terms of technology and access to internet seems to be, in a certain way, in some way diminishing, because everybody's watching TikTok and YouTube, and the amount of data needed to process an AI tool is not, I mean, maybe the AI that I would use in Ateneo would be higher and faster, but some form of AI would be available to everybody. And it's a matter of, huwag na lang kayo mag-TikTok, sayang yung oras ninyo, public school. Here's this new tool you could learn using your cell phone instead of access. So I have a sense that it's a question in my head, is there a way for us to capitalize on that, that internet boom? The data is cheaper nowadays, affordable. There is some form of that tool that we could use to even probably break the divide if we just help people use it and be aware of it as a tool. A question yan. I'm not, this is more a question rather than a statement.
But I would also like to add, but we always think about in the context of industry. So, dami ng tools like Copilot, may 360, like really terrifying things for those whose jobs are those tasks, basically. Pero yung isa sa pinag-isipan ko po talaga parang we keep thinking about AI so we can do more, pero more what, diba? So we can be more productive, we can spend more time doing more work. But then we lose the first point that it should also free us so we can have more life and less work. So yun din pa, ako parang inisip ko rin how can we integrate AI so it's not just a tool for productivity, but actually for us to go home at 5 and actually rest. Di ba? Parang, yan, di ba? What can we actually shorten in our tasks so we don't have to, di ba? When I go home at like 8, di ko na kailangan i-empty yung inbox ko ng emails, di ba? How can I shorten my tasks so I can have more life? So it's not just a matter of figuring out how can we become more efficient, more productive. Pero babalik nga po tayo dun sa shortcut na sinasabi ni Sir, di ba? Parang we should just be mindful of why we're taking the shortcuts. Will it add value to our lives as humans so we can regain our humanity back while this robot does some of the things for us?
But see, this is why my favorite example is accreditation. We should just get ChatGPT or Gemini, whoever, to do all the accreditation narratives because that will buy us more life.
Yeah, we have time for one last.
Yeah, I think a very important point raised was that of bias, right? If all this depends, a tool's worth is dependent on what it's trained on, then that becomes the key question. And so, is there a way to make tools be transparent about what they are trained on so that at the very least the user can make a judgment about what do you think? Let me ask the experts here.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty because like the good ones, the big ones, the most popular ones are not that transparent. I mean, they would say that this is curated. By the way, they would claim it's curated. And of course, there's so many lawsuits like New York Times saying you're using my stuff for this. So, but ideally it should be curated. But I think more importantly is to even know that that's what's going on. Because I think many, even our students or our population will just treat it like a black box. So understanding why this works and how it works, why it makes a mistake or makes mistakes often, why it would help to pry, and that's what Raul was saying. Diba? Parang the more you ask, if you notice, the more you pry, the more accurate it becomes, right? And then on the other hand, for multi-sided things, it's just too patronizing. If you given another side, they'll tell you that makes sense also, and so on. So just understanding why that's going on, because there is an answer, right? So I think the important part is a kind of literacy that we encourage or continue to promote, that says we understand some part of it. You don't. I mean, the other side of being a computer scientist is actually even we don't know what's going on. That, to be honest, this is a neural network. These are just numbers that are trying to model the brain, right? And we make so. But at the end of the day, they're just numbers that happen to spit out sensible, often correct things, right? Just understanding that that's what's going on and why it works, I think will add value already to a little more critical thinking and usefulness.
Sorry, one last? You want? Yeah, one last.
I don't know if we should, but my question is actually related to what AI is trained on, and I don't know if that's something that we should also talk about with students. And like the ethics underlying the training of GenAI. After all, precisely like there's this New York Times lawsuit, and there's supposedly ChatGPT was trained over all of possible texts available on the internet, supposedly. But I don't know if I would believe that yet, because they're so not transparent about it. And at the same time, like the training of AI image generation, what is that trained on? And also, why are certain AIs trained in specific things and not others, right? And this is a question that I realized because I exist also in a very small corner of the internet called crafting, and particularly crochet. And there's this really interesting phenomenon that there are all of these AI-generated crochet patterns, but they don't actually produce what they claim they produce. I feel like it's also something that we can talk about with students. Like, why are there certain types of things that AI can't do, or we aren't capable yet, or haven't trained AI yet to do? What is it that distinguishes these types of creative fields, perhaps, or types of products from the stuff that are easier to train AI on or less resource intensive to train AI on. So it's like it's thinking about how AI works and why certain things are easier or harder to train AI on. So I was just riffing on this with Noel earlier. Could it be that there's something about the way people do crochet that it requires a certain level of individual translating of a certain pattern into an application, or vice versa, a certain image gets translated? I don't know. Or is it a matter of economics? Like, why would an AI company devote so much resources into training AI into generating crochet patterns, which are not really going to earn it money? Let's be honest. It's not profit generating. Or is it a matter of it's very difficult to train an AI to do this because there are so many if-then statements that they have to learn? Is that it? It's really, I think it's about training AI. And what is is there a pedagogical value with talking about students, about training AI? And what is AI trained on? Why is AI trained in particular ways? Yeah, it's not organized thoughts.
Yeah. Pwedeng comment.
And then I'll comment after.
Last. Quick lang siguro, I think the thought of the AI is biased, and on my side, I said, I also need to, my role as a teacher is to learn and to teach my students that they can also end up becoming the curators of truth. That if I am able to influence them to understand, for example, the concept of human dignity in the classroom, and in a way that's, you might say, biased from my perspective, because I want them to learn the idea of human dignity. But then, because I curated it for them, you might say, I hope that they would have the ability then to curate whatever they get as they do research on human dignity. So maybe the role, I think we still have a job as teachers to increase the capacity of our students to want more and to know what to look for. I think that's the difficult job. I'm not saying it's the easy one. Easier said than done, but it's just in my head what we need to keep on doing.
Just one more point. Maybe just bear with me for 3 minutes. I take a very pragmatic view of education. I recognize and accept that 90% of what we discuss in Ateneo will not be discussed after graduation. And I think that's a challenge for us, focusing on the learning material. Does GenAI allow us to appreciate the material more than learning? Does it allow us to appreciate it more? When you prepare an essay and you use GenAI, can I say, not only have I learned this, but I appreciate the truth value of this? You know, I teach theology. I understand theology is not exactly a vogue subject after Ateneo, but I try to make sure that with what little time my students encounter theology, and take note, with today's lifespan being 90 plus, chances are they'll only encounter theology for 4 years out of that 90 plus years. But with what little time they have, I try to make sure that they really immerse themselves in it. I don't want to treat the lessons as a means for promoting critical thinking only. I want value in the material itself. You know, I don't want to say you learn this so you can develop critical thinking after you graduate. But what about the material itself? Does GenAI allow us to appreciate the material, the truth of it? I don't think Immanuel Kant will appreciate the fact that he spent his whole life for his whole work to be summarized in 5 minutes. All right? I don't think the church, 2,000 years, summarized in 5 minutes. I think we can say the lessons that we encounter here in Ateneo, for the students here, you'll only probably encounter this during the 4 years you're here or 5 years you're here, after which you probably never will. So with what brief time you have encountering this material, immerse yourself in it, embrace it. Don't just chew on it and swallow, but rather really enjoy the taste and flavor and ask yourself, does GenAI add sauce to it? Does it really add flavor to it? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and special thanks to our resource persons. We also thank the Office of the Dean of the School of Humanities for assisting us. Uh, for CFMO for helping us with the tech and the recording. And of course for TFI for providing us with the food, and there's more, so please feel free to take some more before you leave.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here, and hopefully you've learned something and inspired you to reflect also. So thank you everyone.